Misfits, outcasts, mutants. My dream, my vision, is for humans and mutants to coexist in peace and prosperity. But rather than being accepted for who they are, mutants are feared and oppressed. But here, with Cerebro, I can find them and teach them to use their abilities for good. Humankind is evolving, and these are the stories of that evolution. For 60 years you've read their tales, and tonight we celebrate them. To me, my X-Men.
So it's 1991, and what do you do with the most popular franchise in comics? Wipe the slate clean and start over. With a fresh X-Men #1, a new direction for flagship Uncanny X-Men, sizzling hot spin-offs, and new heroes and threats, the late 80s and early 90s introduced a new generation of readers to the bombastic, colorful, and wild mutant saga. Myself, I remember being 10 years old and going to the Five and Dime, look it up, kids, and seeing Infinity Gauntlet #6 and X-Men #3 on the rack at the same time. Those two issues, especially X-Men, supercharged my love and interest in comics like nothing else. And we talked a little bit about events and crossovers with Chris, Walter, and Luis earlier. And the beauty of them, especially with X-Men comics and X-Men fans, is everyone has their one big event that hit them at the right time in all the right ways. For me, it's all about 1992's Executioner song, what is commonly referred to by holy people and historians as the greatest story ever told. And you can fact check that. What's your favorite X-Men event and why is it Executioner song? Let us know in the chat. But this show ain't just me waxing poetic about Cable and Strife and Bishop and Boom Boom's Wired Jaw and ooey gooey Apocalypse. We got new guests to chat with. Joining me to talk about their iconic work from this era are two supremely talented creators, Rob Liefeld, the dean of Deadpool University, whose iconic art and stories helped usher in a new era for mutants, and Marc Silvestri, whose work at Marvel included 5 years of beloved art on Uncanny X-Men and Wolverine. So Rob, hi, how you doing? So right out the gates, when you start at Marvel, you're jumping into X-Books. You got X-Factor, Uncanny X-Men, a rager of a Wolverine-focused What If, which I really love, then New Mutants. How hyped were you from even like a fan standpoint to draw mutants and eventually plot their stories as well?
Yeah, Ryan, thank you, and thanks for having me, and great to see you. There was no bigger franchise than X-Men growing up. It was and remains my favorite group of characters, group of stories, and so the opportunity, when given the call to come and work for Marvel and draw X-Men related titles, you can't imagine how thrilled I was, and at the same time how intimidated, because of course, I had to slot an X-Men issue in between the gentleman that I'm on here with, Marc Silvestri. I'm like, oh crap, I have to draw.
You did all right. You did all right.
So it was the X-Men remains, like I said, my favorite Marvel, my favorite superhero concept characters. They still entertain me, and those memories are fantastic.
Yeah. We got a bunch of great comments in here already. Outback era forever. Two of the GOATs. For me, it all started with Rob's Cable, and everyone always pictures Silvestri's Wolverine in their heads, which, I mean, you ain't wrong there, chat. Mark, you come on to Uncanny X-Men in 1987, but aside from X-Men vs. Avengers, that limited series, and a few other issues here and there, you'd mostly done solo titles. But obviously Uncanny X-Men is a massive book, and you're helping refresh looks, introduce new characters, new villains. Was your game plan for Uncanny X-Men any different from those other titles you'd start? What was your perspective going into that?
My game plan was just hang on and don't disappoint anybody. That was my game plan. I was in my 20s, and like you said, I just did like single issue stuff, and I did X-Men versus the Avengers, and people may not know this, but that's actually what got me the X-Men gig to work with Chris Claremont. People also may not notice that I actually didn't do the last issue of that 4-issue miniseries because I got on the X-Men, and sometimes I'm not a dummy, and I went, sure, I'll take that gig. But yeah, it was look, I was in my 20s. I was working with the biggest writer in comics on the biggest book in comics. It rarely gets any better than that. And I was just happy to be there and work with Chris. Chris was a great collaborator and very open to my visual interpretation of whatever characters he was going to throw my way. And it was very freeing. I think Chris is very respectful of the artists he's working with. I think that shows in all of his all the work he's done, which we all know spans a lot of years and a lot of artists. And I think he's always had a way, and the X-Men have always had a way of bringing out the best in what we do. And I think, Rob, you can attest to that as well. There's something about those characters and the way that they are written by some of the best writers in comics that just brings out the best in us as artists.
Rob, there's a comment that came in. Liefeld's X-Force is the first comic series I ever collected in full, which is great segue into my question, which is, Rob, there's this window here, 1990, 1991, with some of the biggest launches of all time. Spider-Man, X-Men, X-Force. When did you start thinking about taking the New Mutants team and evolving them into X-Force? And also, can you give us a sense of what it felt like as you're writing and you're drawing these characters during this explosive era? Obviously you've gotten a little traction under you, but it still must have been wild.
Look, again, they're my favorite period of my entire career. That was tremendous growth, tremendous energy, tremendous opportunities. Again, when it came to the New Mutants, they were open to all sorts of new ideas, and they had asked me if I would come up with, some new designs, some new characters. The editorial team wanted to have a new leader. I, as a fan of the group, felt like the team was in sore need of something, of a fresh voice, because the X-Men really had Xavier and Magneto kind of populating that world. And while they had both kind of gone in and out of the New Mutants book, the New Mutants didn't really have a voice of their own that was connecting, because I was still a fan, man. I'm going every Wednesday and buying these comics. I'm in my 20s, my young 20s. So I jumped at the chance, and look, you know what? I could have put forth characters that people rejected. I was fortunate. I was on the same wavelength as the fans because I was such a fan. They totally dug everything that was going on with Cable, and because of the success of Cable and the response to Cable, they just kept, they being Marvel editorial, just entrusted me with the future of the franchise. And we started discussions, I'd say 5 issues in, because I really honestly, what all these guys had that I was terribly jealous of was an X in their title. Okay, X-Men, X Factor, even Excalibur worked an X in there, right? I mean, so I'm like, can I not be? And Wolverine doesn't need an X. He rises above all of it. Okay, so it goes without saying. But I just really felt, I mean, in all honesty, just I wanted an X in the title, and so we knocked around those names, and we settled on X-Force. And like you said, we were able to wedge in there and catch right away. I mean, Ryan, every month I would go do store signings during that period and get the feedback straight from the fans, and the crowds were getting bigger and bigger. Mark and I did a shared appearance during that time, and I pulled up, and Southern California, just mobs of people outside, because again, the X books were just what were rocking the comics world. They were just the epicenter of all the excitement.
Mm-hmm. I like how you say you wedged in there. It's like the biggest damn wedge of a #1 issue in the world, Rob. All right, I want to keep pulling in some stuff from the fans in here. John A. says Strife is one of my all-time favorite villains, period. Amen to that, John.
Thank you.
And then we got one in here that says Silvestri's Wolverine covers got me buying at 7 years old, begging mom, which that is a great one because that segues into what I wanted to talk about, Mark. Of course, in addition to Uncanny X-Men run, you got over 20 issues on Wolverine with writer Larry Hama, and for me, that was my Wolverine Bible. I remember losing my freaking mind trying to get and then finally getting number 41 with Wolverine, Cable, Sabretooth, and the sewers. That was my jam. And at number 50, I read over and over again. I damn near wore out that die-cut cover. What brought you from Uncanny X-Men? You talked about how big that was. Right. What brought you from that to Wolverine?
Well, it's the timing was really perfect because I'd worked on, like you said, the X-Men for like 4 years, and a team book can be a real grind. And even though Wolverine is X-Men, it was a single character, and it had a new voice with Larry Hama, who I had never worked with as a writer. He was my editor when I first started with Marvel. He was my editor on Conan the King, which was, if anyone knows Larry, that's this experience to be edited by him. But working with him as a writer and an artist was fantastic. And I loved how he put Wolverine in the real world, grounded. It wasn't so much Wolverine as it was Logan. You know, if it weren't for the fact that Wolverine, the title was such a seller, the book should have been called Logan, because that's what it was, you know. And it was just a lot of fun, you know. And my time on the X-Men had ended. You know, Jim was coming in like a storm, and it's like, okay, this is perfect for me and perfect for the fans. They get someone fresh in there, and I get to do something new. And it was just it all worked out perfectly. And I have just as many fond memories working with Larry on Wolverine and some of those amazing stories as I did with Chris on X-Men and those amazing stories. So I was blessed during those years of my career. Still some of my favorite memories in comics.
I love to hear it. This one is a fun question for the two of you. What is your favorite moment, page, or even single panel in X-Men history? Could be something that you worked on or something that you just, you know, blasted your face off because you're a fan. Rob, I mean, you've been talking about how much of a fan you are. Do you have one thing that you close your eyes, you could just picture it?
So, yeah, I would mortgage everything I had to buy the cover to X-Men 141 Days of Future Past. I'm friends with a bunch of avid art collectors, and we were out just a month ago. And the funny thing is, Ryan, they're all Marvel pieces. Mine happened to be an X-Men piece. They're like, well, this page of Spider-Man, like, what would you do to get? And I'm like, man, X-Men, I'm telling you, I can tell you, I had to walk past the counter. It was called U-Totem. It was kind of a 7-Eleven type marketplace. And, you didn't know it was coming each and every month when X-Men was shipping. And I turned, and there is a Wolverine with silver in his hair with a leather jacket protecting Kitty Pryde, right? Who's older. And you got that infamous poster. And I mean, literally, I was shaking and I was stumbling the 3-block walk home because I wouldn't take my eyes off the comic. And to this day, I mean, that image, that storyline, and it's just so incredible. They did it in 2 issues. What Claremont and Byrne and Austin did with that storyline was done roughly within 40 pages, and it is my favorite X-Men Marvel comic book story of all time. So there, I'll let Mark go.
Before you go, Mark, I was doing a bunch of research on that book too, and thinking about how much work Chris and John were also doing at the time, and how tight it is, how good it is. It's so good. Sorry, Mark, please.
It's brilliant.
No. Look, it's hard to top that. I have a single image, which first of all, Walt Simonson was one of my early and favorite influences. And every time, Rob and I were talking about this earlier, every time I try to incorporate any Walt Simonson in my work, I failed miserably. Because only Walt Simonson can be Walt Simonson, right? But he did this cover when Master Mold had a hold of Cyclops, and Cyclops is zapping him with his lasers, and I went, oh man, it's so Walt, and it's so beautiful. And I just remember that cover so well as like just affecting me. He goes, oh man, how do I rip off, how do I homage Walt Simonson a little bit more in my work? Yeah, but you can't do it. So, but yeah, that was one of those images that just kind of burned in my head. Just a huge Walt Simonson fan anyway.
How can you not be? Earlier, we were talking about events, crossovers, and you've both been right in the thick of those stories with epics such as Inferno or Extinction Agenda, among others. What's your perspective on, whether it's drawing crossover issue, being in the meetings, talking about them, because you've got lots of extra characters. There's, I would imagine, lots of extra cooks in the kitchen because you're mixing a whole bunch of stuff. Is it fun? Is it stressful? Is it just like, this is another day, we're doing the work, we got to get it done? Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, those crossovers were not just another day, right? They were an honor to be part of, quite frankly, and it was just a lot of fun. Inferno for me was one of my favorites, and again, because you had these other books involved and other talents involved, it was just great to see what other people were doing with all the same characters. And what Chris had written was just so crazy anyway, that all the rules were basically off. So I could have just fun creating things that normally you just wouldn't do. Mailboxes eating people, elevators eating people. It's like, you don't get to do that in comics, especially back then. Now you can do whatever you want, but back then it was like pretty stringent as far as like, this was a superhero comic, you're doing superheroes. So Inferno was really kind of liberating, right? And you got to do these kind of out there versions of all of everyone's favorite heroes. The evil dark version of Wolverine, the evil dark version of Havoc. And it was a wonderful experience, and I sign a lot of those at conventions, obviously. And every time I see a copy of Inferno, it's like I get this little smile on my face. That was my personal favorite as far as the event crossovers and such. Inferno, I'd have to say that. I loved it all, but Inferno kind of this much higher above the others experience.
The rules. That's great. Rob, what about you?
I just want to join in the chorus and say Inferno. I said this to Mark before coming on. It is, to me, the best of the coordinated events Marvel ever did. And there's a generous amount, and they're all spectacular. Inferno, because Mark and Walt were just firing on all cylinders, that storyline. And it was just a hell of a storyline, too. Look, you know what, Ryan? The only storyline I ever participated in, and I could only do it kind of from a distance because they were granting me the opportunity to start writing the stories right after, and I couldn't get bogged down. And I really feel like Extinction Agenda was, and I've always said this, I talk about this on my podcast, in all honesty, it was an X-Men vehicle. It was really more about the events that were happening in the X-Men. It's my favorite work Jim Lee ever did on the X-Men is his chapters. But I had to tap out early on, just do what's called breakdowns, because I was preparing I wanted to put all my effort into the last 3 issues of the New Mutants, which would be 98, 99, 100. And Ryan, at the time, I didn't think those books would be collected as their own kind of chapter. But as the years go by and Marvel has collected 98, 99, 100 as their own like trade paperback, and you go like, I just had, because it was such a big pressure. Sometimes you be careful what you wish for. I'm going to now start writing the stories for these books. And so I pivoted my direction towards that. But like I said, the Extinction Agenda stuff with Jim, I thought was the strongest. It's my favorite work. It was really exciting. It gave you, just like with what Mark was doing in Inferno, it gave you all the standoffs you wanted. Wolverine versus Archangel. Again, I'm a fan. I can remember going to the store and getting it and going, oh my gosh, look what Jim is drawing, right? And so look, then afterwards, I feel like you mentioned Executioner's Song. That was the cultivation of so much that I had worked really hard to set up. So it was great watching it come together. And again, what Marvel does great is they made it so much bigger and more chapters. And I'm with you, Ryan. That's one of my tops. I'd say after Inferno, that was a pinnacle, I think, for the X-Men, because you just never stop being a fan, right? I mean, you're just. I'm with those characters. I'm a ride or die for the rest of my life. And before I get closed off, I got to show this. I brought my I brought my signed X-Men #1. I got this about 8 years ago, and I said, Stan, you got to sign this. And he signed it, and I got into CGC, and I'm fortunate to get a 5 because this thing is beat. It is beat. But come on, people, it's the 60th anniversary of the X-Men.
The fact that it's a 5 is even better. That is a red comic book. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
So I just, before I get played off, the music comes and gets me I just had to show my X-Men love with my That's X-Men cool. Signed by Stan the Man. So there you go. Sorry, Ryan, I had to speak that in.
I love it.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. We've got a ton of stuff coming in here. I'm looking at the chat that I'm getting. They love the cover. Lots of wows. Someone said Liefeld is a real one. Love the passion in the Zoom. This event is making me so happy. Why are these guys even cooler than I imagined? And Rob, I've known you a long time. I love talking to you. Mark, it is a pleasure having the chance to talk to you here.
Happy to be here.
There's one in here from Connor G, who says, Marc, your work on Uncanny is my personal favorite. I especially admire the way you brought contemporary 80s fashion in the book, which made it feel so edgy and fun. Do you have a fashion background?
Well, clearly the way that I'm dressed. I do. No, it's that was one of the fun things about comics, is being able to bring in different skill sets that people maybe don't recognize. Like I was never in the fashion business, but I always appreciate good design. And I always thought the best of fashion incorporated really good design. And the best in superhero comics and superhero characters, they all have elements of design that just work, and they become evergreen, right? And every version of that character over the decades, literally, is a version of whatever the look was that worked the best from way back in the day. And so it was just fun. I mean, Rob, you probably, obviously, you created so many characters that a huge part of the fun is you get on the drawing table, you just start sketching ideas, right? It's the process of elimination. Sometimes it happens immediately. It's like, boom, there it is. Sometimes like, oh, that sucks, erase that. That sucks, erase that. Ooh, I like that little piece of that one character is about, that much of the shoulder, and suddenly your design starts to grow from that, and you get that design language in your head, and it all comes together. And that's just like, we're all blessed in this business as creators that we can do that, and as comic book people, we wear all the hats. We're the set designers, we're the production designers, we're the directors as we tell the story. Where else do you get to do that, right? And nobody can really tell us no, because no one's putting tens of millions of dollars behind us like you do in a feature film. It costs a few bucks to make a comic book, right? So we could kind of do what we wanted to. And still to this day, that holds true. And I tell people all the time, because I've dipped my toes in all kinds of media. So has Rob. And Rob, see if you agree with me on this. But compared to all other media, I don't care what it is: television, film, video gaming, the most direct, the most unfiltered, clear path to your voice as a creator and getting your idea out there is comic books.
Amen. Yes,
right?
sir.
That is comic books. It all starts there and then can go wherever it wants to. But if you are a creator out there and you want to get your idea completely unfiltered, bing, go to comic books.
Amen.
Amen to that.
That is like amen. Amen. The amen, as well as the X-Men.
That's
amen. There you go. New idea. Copyright. There you go.
I love this chat. I love talking to you too. It's been astonishing, but we got to wrap this one up. A huge thank you to Rob Liefeld and Marc Silvestri for joining us.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you.
Wonderful, you guys. Thank you so much.